Hello, Toronto. Hello, world. This is Eduardo Harari from Spanglish Sports World here on the Single TV network, channels 249 and 250. Remember that you can download the apps for Single TV on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and on the iOS and Android stores. Remember, the application is completely free. Therefore, there is no reason why not to download it and enjoy it. After you have enjoyed it for a little bit of time, please come back to the iOS stores and Apple and Android stores and leave us a rating and a comment to make sure that we understand that how the application is working, and as well, if you are enjoying the programming or anything that you want of programming that you want to see from us. Well, it's a great day today. I am joined by two members of the clubhouse crew of the Blue Jays stock. First of all, out of London, Ontario, Canada, Tyler Childs. If I'm correct, a traveling Blue Jay. And then there is Rick Kotick, who is a great fan and a great analyst of the Blue Jays as a whole. So, guys, welcome to the show. Tyler, how are you doing?
I'm good, Eduardo. Thanks for having me back, and looking forward to the Jays maybe taking it to the Boston Red Sox this week.
And Rick, what's going on with you these days?
Good to be back, Eduardo. Just like Ty said, loving the early returns from a baseball season this year and going through the motions.
Well, as Ty mentioned it, this inner week is a great week for the Blue Jays. They get to face the wonderful nemesis of the Boston Red Sox. The Jays are only a game and a half out from Boston, so this could be turned out the week that Toronto goes in top of the American League East for the first time in a long time. What do you guys think is going to happen? This rotation is a little bit harmed by injury, but hey, the offense seems to be responding very well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we got the aces going tonight. Eduardo Rodriguez for the Red Sox isn't lying down. He's got a 4.15 ERA, so he's not a nobody, and he's just hanging in there. He's 5-1 because the Red Sox are putting up runs. They're leading the divisions in runs, run differential. So there's a lot to like about this game tonight. Ryu's going to have to be the stopper that we need him to be. So that's the first thing I'm really looking forward to. I'm a pitching guy myself, so I always look forward to good pitching matchups, and we have two very similar pitchers going against high octane offenses tonight. So that for me is the first thing that I'm most excited about. But then really just looking to the Jays trying to fill some gaps over the next couple of days with the pitching, right? We've got Ross Stripling going against Garrett Richards tomorrow. That one's the big question mark, I think. With Stripling, he had a great outing last time after giving up a home run on the first pitch to Ronald Acuna Jr. But lots to look forward to here. I mean, I'm excited about this series. Anytime Toronto Boston are playing, it's always great baseball.
So Rick,
yeah.
One of the bright spots of this Blue Jays lineup and has been sorry, I got just sidetracked. Has been probably the inner core of this Jays lineup in the infield. Where do you think we can hope for this inner lineup and the batting order for this series?
Well, it's a great point, Eduardo, and I think confidence defensively, which is what was lacking at the very beginning of the season, seems to have coincided with an increase in offensive production as well. And I just really like the way, that top of the order has been producing with Simeon and Bo, and then Vladdy and Teoscar are bringing the lumber behind them. So I really thought that has set the stage really well. And I've noticed more sound defensive play as well. It just seems to be all clicking at the right time, along with some timely pitching. So I like the way that Montoya has shaped the lineup. Of course, he's making some changes, plugging some holes here and there. But when Simeon sets the table at the top of the order, that veteran presence and a guy who knows how to get things done, when he's on, it spells good things for the Jays.
So, Ty,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ty. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think one of the things, and we talked about this a lot in the fan club, talking about the left side of this infield. And, I haven't seen the improvement I want to see at third base yet. But, I mean, you got to talk about Bo Bichette. He's looked a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Vladdy's bailed him out a couple times here and there when he has made mistakes, and that's what the first baseman's supposed to do. Vladdy made his first error on the weekend of the season, and people are still looking at him as a poor defensive infielder, which is just wrong. Bichette has righted the ship, though, and I think the alarm bells are now just like checkpoints. Is like, is he still okay? Is he still okay? As opposed to, we need a new shortstop, which is what it was 3 weeks ago.
Right, which was kind of crazy to think about. And as baseball fans, we're all emotional, and just the same way they were calling for Aaron Judge and Stanton to be benched, for the Yankees at the beginning of the season. Bo will be Bo, but I heard some interesting points by Louis Rivera, who's the infield coach and base coach for the Jays, and working with Bo and with Biggio in the backfield between games, working on their timing and their lateral movement. And I think these guys are young. They're uber confident because they know that they've got the skills, and it's just a matter of, like I said, having it click. And with that extra work that they put in, early returns look pretty good. And so I have no doubt that that Bo will be steady the rest of the year. But one thing, Ty, you mentioned it. What a nice surprise, too. I kept myself as surprised talking about Vladdy at first base. I don't think he's just an average defender. I think he's been above average from what I've seen, and he's got a confidence there that really surprised me.
Well, I think you've seen the adjustment. I mean, picking balls over at first there were some footwork issues early in the season that he was making up with just on pure athleticism. And I think he's starting to right that ship. And there's been a couple bang plays where his stretch has been a little slow to the ball and has maybe cost them an out or two here or there. And that doesn't get marked on the box score, and you got to pay really close attention to catch those things, but they're there. And so, but a year ago, they were very glaringly obvious mistakes that were happening. And now we're talking about fractional ones. So huge progress all around that infield.
So, guys, one of the things that I have been looking at the news, and it's surprisingly that the Toronto media is criticizing a lot Bo Bichette for lack of offense. I don't see that. We are a month and a half into the season, basically, and the guy has a 275 average, which is above the league average. What are they talking about? Because there is no way that someone that is hitting an OPS of 814 and a slugging of 494 is doing something wrong to me.
Yeah, the league-wide batting average is something around 230 or 240. Ty probably knows better than I do. There's been an offensive rut, for the first month and a half of the season. Bo, one of the things that stood out for me in the shortened season last year, and even early on when he came up, was he was a clutch hitter. This isn't a guy that seemed to come up in big situations and kind of get consumed by the moment in a bad way. He's always seems to put together good at bats, come up with some good base hits when they need it to get those key RBIs. Again, he's going to be there, and I think everyone needs to hold back on the emotional aspect a little bit and let him find his groove, which I think he's already started to find.
Well, and I think it's insane that there's any criticism of a kid at his age playing the hardest position on the diamond, arguably. And, you mentioned the 275 average, but a full season pace, 137 runs, 37 home runs, 104 RBIs with 29, or 104 RBIs with 29 stolen bases. That's his full season pace right now. Like, that's elite. That's not just good. That is elite. That is a top 5 offensive player in the game of baseball with those statistics. That's Mookie Betts. That's not quite Acuna Jr. because of the speed, but everything else there is off the charts, and there's zero reason to be concerned about the offensive production of Bo Bichette. The only thing that you should know, he's going to be a little bit streaky. He's going to see the ball better some days than another, and that happens when you swing as hard as that kid does, because he is not trying to get cheated. That's for sure.
No, and the other thing, I mean, I would be more concerned with Springer as a whole. I mean, let's be real. We have not seen Springer very much this season so far, and after signing this big, huge contract.
The only thing I would say, though, Eduardo, is that the only couple of balls that he hit have still not landed. So, there was a brief flash of something to be excited about.
Look, it was the biggest free agent signing in club history, right? We committed $150 million to Springer over the next 6 years. So, of course, fans are going to be eager, and all eyeballs were on him from the moment he showed up at Dunedin for his first day of spring training. So we're anxious to see him. Played in a couple games and pulled himself out. Look, the messaging from management didn't help, right? When they're like, we're just giving him a day of rest. He's really hot. It's been a couple of days, and then okay, now he's back on the DL. So he will be there. We know who George Springer is. We've all seen him in an Astros uniform come up clutch season after season, playoff after playoff. He will be there, and understandably, we're all anxious to see him. But I've got to say, I am pleasantly surprised with how the Jays are not just treading water, but flourishing without him. I would have thought with the rash of injuries, with the inconsistency of some of the players early on, if you'd told me we would be 5 games above 500, I wouldn't have believed it. And so this just bodes well for when Springer does get back in the lineup. If Pearson comes back and is in the form we believe he'll be in as well, not to mention maybe some of the other guys that we're thinking about coming up, it means good things going forward.
Well, and I think one of the things that the casual fan maybe might not see because they don't see all of the games, they don't see the broadcasts as often, but George Springer is very much involved in this team. He's not sitting back in the training facility or not coming to games. Like, he is actively on that bench coaching his teammates. And I think we're seeing early returns because one of the biggest things that I've noticed this year is, and I think it's hard to not notice if you're watching enough of the games, is just the grit, right? We're winning a lot of games late in the game. And the only thing that I want to see from this team in that regard as a progression is I really want to see more pitches per at bat in the later innings. I want to see them not either putting a ball in play in 3 pitches or under, or striking out in 3 pitches, which we've seen a bit. So, that's a progression. And, if you look to the Jeter era Yankees, that's what made them so dangerous was that, when you got past the 7th inning, not only did you have Rivera coming, but you had a team that was in there seeing 5 and 6 pitches in a bat, and it makes that other pitcher's job very, very difficult. And so that's the last piece of the puzzle for me with this team is just that veteran mentality. And it starts with guys like George Springer and Marcus Semien, who's quietly been grinding away as well.
Mm-hmm. And a quality of a player with the quality of Marcus Semien, not to mention George Springer, you did a great job of touching on that, but we know the quiet confidence that Semien has from his career in Oakland. But if you didn't, and you just look at the reception that he got back coming home to Oakland, they don't do scoreboard montages, and prolonged standing ovations, and all members of the media and Oakland Coliseum staff all speaking wonderful things about him. You don't just say that if it wasn't true. Like, Marcus Semien is a top quality guy. And along with Springer, those are the type of veterans that you want mentoring this young core.
And the Jays paid $18 million to get that.
Yeah. So one of the biggest surprises, I think, in this staff has to be Randall Grichuk. I mean, he just has been hot since spring training. He came out to play the way he knows how to play, and a lot of people didn't count him in. They said, "Oh, Springer is here. He's just another utility player that is going to be there for the Jays." But the surprise is that, hey, 273, 314, 455 slugging, and 768 OPS. Mm-hmm. I think that is a lot. And if you look farther on, if you look at the projection over the year, that would be it's an amazing. He's challenging Bloody for RBIs. Come on, when did you think that Randall Grichuk would be battling with Bloody Guerrero for RBI leadership?
It's amazing what a little competition will do for you, right? Because Grichuk heard those rumors, and a lot of fans counted him out, and they said, "Look, it's a great problem to have this glut of outfielders, but naturally Grichuk is the odd man out with Springer and Teoscar and Lourdes and even Biggio getting occasional starts in the outfield." But look, Randall Grichuk's been around quite a while now, and he's not even close to over his prime. I mean, this is a guy who's got decent power, he's got a little bit of speed, and he plays a good defensive outfield too. So he won't blow you away in any one category, but you put it all together. For me, he's someone great you want to have in the lineup.
So the only thing I have to say about Randall Grichuk is who remembers Superman?
So the one thing, and Rick, you may recall this, but I think maybe the first time you ever heard me speak, it might have been saying that Randall Grichuk was going to be the regular outfielder and not Lourdes, which was the consensus in the offseason. And, this started a couple years back for me. The one thing that people don't realize about Randall Grichuk is he might, after Vladdy, be the best off-speed hitter on the team. And that has obvious value in itself, because that's really what takes an average MLBer and makes them above average is, can you hit the off-speed pitches? And he is arguably one of the better ones on the team. And what changed for me a couple years ago was that you started to see the plate discipline on the slider away. And everyone remembers Brett Lowry just aimlessly swinging at these sliders away. And Randall started making the adjustment because he was falling into that trap as well. And now you start to see him knocking the ball to right field. And to Eduardo's point about the RBIs, that's why he's cashing them in. And I look back at a guy that didn't get any credit on this sort of thing, like JP Arancibia, racked up RBIs for the same reason. Runner on third, ground ball to second base. Runner on third, ground ball to second base. And yes, he hit 205, but if you were to look at the number of those RBIs that came from a ground ball to second base, that's what you want out of the bottom half of your lineup. Cash runs. That's it. Like, just be productive. That's it. You're going to strike out more than often. But with Randall, it's interesting. The career arc, supposed to be great, wasn't great. Now we're seeing the improvement, and now he's being considered above average. And I think it's, as a kind of a segue, like, I think it's a career trajectory we might see from Rowdy Tellez, a guy that came up and was told to hit home runs instead of hitting the ball to left center. And I think that adjustment might happen in a similar trajectory for him as well.
So now I want to touch pitching, because a lot of people have been left quiet by the performance of Steven Matz. No one thought that Steven Matz was the pitcher that he was, or that he could come back under the American League to pitch the way he's pitching. 5-2. His ERA is not that good. It's at 4.29 right now, but it can improve over the season, I think. But no one expected this of Steven Matz. It's just crazy.
It's interesting, Eduardo, and I think coming up through the Mets system, where they saw that potential. I joked with someone the other day. He was like the fifth Beatle when you talked about DeGrom and Wheeler and Harvey. And the other name I'm forgetting at the moment, but Steven Matz was the fifth guy in that rotation coming up. We're like, well, if he can contribute anything to this elite starting rotation, then we've really got something there. And Steven Matz showed spurts of it with the Mets, and I guess, all credit to the Jays pitching coaches and Pete Walker, because, aside from a couple of shaky starts, I've liked what we've gotten from him. And if you can get 5 or 6 innings of quality starts, 3 runs or less, that's what you want Steven Matz to do for you.
Well, and I think when you talk about the back of your rotation, you're not expecting consistency. I mean, that's why they're the back of the rotation in the first place. So I think if you get 3 out of 5 starts where it's bordering on a quality start, like that's the expectation you should have for an SP4 or SP5, right? I mean, that's just the reality of what he's meant to be. Now, I mean, you touched on Pete Walker. I mean, this guy deserves way more credit than he's getting outside of Toronto, because, I think it's a big reason why people are now looking positively on the front office as well, because he's making that bullpen look really good as well. It's not just the reclamation projects in the rotation, but we're taking other people's garbage and turning it into the best bullpen in baseball, right? And I mean, it's a very interesting, and that can only last so long. We need to get healthy again, and that's a different part of this conversation. But that's a huge part of this team is Pete Walker, and he doesn't get enough credit. And Steven Matz is just one example of what he's doing for this team.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ty. One of the names that comes to mind, he's on the IL right now, is Anthony Castro, though. We picked him up from the Tigers. I think it was Rule 5 or anyway, off the scrap heap somehow. And before he went on the IL, he shut it down in any situation he gave him. They gave him middle innings, they gave him mop-up duty, and he'd come in and give you 1 or 2 scoreless innings, proving that he can be an effective piece of the bullpen. You're seeing it with Bergen as well, and there's a couple other pieces I think that can last the whole season for the Jays.
So another of the big surprises that in that pitching staff has to be Jordan Romano, a guy that was, they said, possibly a third, possibly a fourth, if not the fifth starter for the Jays rotation, and he has just proven that persistence really works. He has been very persistent, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him last week on Zoom, and he was at the stadium at 12 noon. I was like surprised. I said, it's your pitching day. Normally, you guys get to come in on your pitching debut. Basically, you guys can come in an hour prior to the game if you want. What are you doing at 12 noon? He goes, well, I have to get in my weight, do my weight work and this and that. And I said, really? You don't stop? He goes, no, I have to persist on my health. And that's what's going to get me through the season. And this guy is a workaholic.
Well, and I think he's an interesting one because, I mean, you watch him on the broadcast and he's pacing and he's walking down in that bullpen and he's bordering on psychopath. And I love every second of that as a guy that's coming in late end parts of the game. Like, I want that guy to be crazy because, you have to be on that edge, knife's edge a little bit to be a closer in the major leagues. And, I think it's been a job that he has kind of shown that he's capable of doing, but the issue is health, right? And so I actually like to hear that he's there building up because I forget what the nerve issue he had on the first IL stint, but that usually is a result of a muscle imbalance. So I think that's probably part of the regime that he's now on is, okay, let's get these things squared away so we don't have this issue later in the season. Because, a combo of him and Julian Merriweather coming out of the back end of that bullpen is going to cause nightmares for people. That is something that other teams don't have solutions for. These guys are just that good. So I love it. I love that he's there that early. And, I would love to see what his steps per day look like because it's got to be an off the chart number.
I'm with Ty. I like a little bit of crazy in the back end of my bullpen. And, he's also goes to the Ty Child school of growing out the beard in the pandemic. So I like that look that's going on. But I refer to Jordan Romano as a gentle giant. You guys might know he's a local product, played baseball in Toronto. And just before the pandemic, so going into spring training before the pandemic started, we're talking probably November, December, he held a baseball clinic here with some local youth baseball products. And my kids were there and he spent a lot of time working with the kids, like just to see his way about him as well. He's great. He's a great instructor. He's a great in terms of portraying confidence and teaching the younger generation. So that's just a little softer side that I noticed, but combine that with what we've seen out of him this season. I really like Jordan Romano.
Yeah.
So I want to talk Nate Pearson with you guys because in my eyes, he's still the prospect that he is. He's going to develop into a great pitcher, but do you guys think that he was overworked last season to try to and brought in the wrong way? Because he should be in the starting rotation right now, but because he was thrown into the claws of the league without proper warm-ups and everything, would that have made a difference?
That's a tough one because don't forget there was tremendous pressure on Shapiro and Atkins, going back to when this kid was mowing people down in the minor leagues as an 18-year-old, and fans and everybody was clamoring to call him up, bring him up now. And of course, you never govern and you never manage a team based on solely what the fans want. So, whether they brought him up last year in a shortened season for those 5 or 6 starts and that was not the right call, that's a tough, that's a tough decision to make. What worries me, though, is these kind of niggling and nagging injuries that tend to persist if they're not taken care of properly. And Nate Pearson was going to be counted on in spring training as the anchor number 2 starter in the rotation. And I think now it's just a matter of making sure he's right, all the way right. And if that means a little bit of extra time in the minors to get the mechanics down and then bring him up, because they don't want to bring him up too early and have to send him back down again, or God forbid back on the IL, because they are counting on him for some decent production this year.
Yeah, and for me, this is the new era of pitchers, though, right? We're talking about high velo guys that are everywhere in baseball, and they get to the pros because they can throw ridiculously hard. And Pearson showed hints of dominance in the minors, but there were still some injuries, right? He missed, I forget if it was the entire 18 season basically that he had missed. But there was some warning signs to this sort of thing, and it happens, right? You're a big huge dude playing a sport that goes 0 to 60 every couple of seconds, right? So, there's injuries that are bound to happen. Now, are they career enders? Rarely. They're usually nagging things that persist. And that's part of why the inning count is a thing, right? It's why the buildup is there. And everyone always associates it with Tommy John surgery. And it has a lot more to do with the entire body uh, being ready to pitch over an entire major league season. And you talk about guys like Ubaldo Hernandez that used to run miles every single day, and that's what it takes to be a professional athlete. That for me, the big concern I have with Nate Pearson isn't physicality, isn't the stuff. It's the development of the third pitch, right? Like it's there, but it's not set up properly, and so that comes down to the pitching staff and coaching staff working together to get a strategy for him lined up, because if he's going to come out and throw a fastball slider all day, that's only going to last so long. And every single mistake is going to get hit because it's a 50-50. And you need to have that mix. I was talking about this in another group on Clubhouse yesterday, talking about the splitter. He's the kind of guy I would love to see mix in the splitter because I think that arm angle would play really well from that, similar to a Jonathan Papelbon, kind of a similar frame. So for me, I need that third pitch before I'm ready to get excited about Nate Pearson, because frankly, and I've said this for a couple of years now since we drafted him, I'm an Alek Manoah guy. I think he's the guy that we should be excited about right now, not Nate Pearson.
So yeah, I agree, Ty. And it's not just his starts in AAA so far, what he did in spring training. I've watched Manoah since he's been drafted. He's a big kid. He looks like he's got the makeup of a pitcher too. Like he looks durable.
And he had the inning count in college, right? Which very few guys do, right? He had big innings in his last year at West Virginia, and not every starter has that coming into pro ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I like too, what I saw in the limited times I've seen him in spring training and in the highlights so far, the minors, is that he's got the stuff that can blow anybody away at AAA in terms of his fastball. Well, what he's doing is he's pitching. He's got a mindset where he's throwing the hook. He's throwing 3 or 4 straight sliders to guys that he knows that they can't touch. And then he'll mix up their timing with the fastball, and he'll spot it on the inside or the outside corner. And I like a pitcher who's not just going out there and throwing gas, but who's thinking. He's thinking along with his catcher.
And one thing to note really quickly, he was supposed to start tonight, and the Jays have moved him to tomorrow. So just something to note, that generally when there's a realignment in the rotation, there's a plan. So that doesn't happen that often in a minor league level, unless there's a rainout, which there wasn't here. So definitely interesting that they're lining him up with the Ross Stripling outing. So something to note moving forward.
So one of the other guys in that pitching staff of the Jays that has surprised me is David Phelps. Phelps, and what I am surprised is that they are not using him more than they have used him, because his numbers are outstanding. You look at, he has an average of 216 and a whip of 116. Those are great numbers for a guy that has only 34 games of experience in the major leagues. And it's interesting to see that they haven't tried to build him up to get into a fifth spot in the rotation, because he can probably go farther in that situation.
Well, I think with Phelps, so they did move him to the 60 day. So that'll be why we're not seeing him a whole lot. So he's on the IL. He had a lat strain, I believe, something somewhat severe. So I think we're not gonna see him till the middle of the summer. But this is a guy that has. You're right though. He was really good in the games that we saw him. He saved a couple games in the fifth and sixth inning that were out of control, and he kept the guys in it long enough that we ended up making a couple come from behind scenarios look really easy. So Phelps is a veteran, the kind of guy you want to be your sixth, seventh guy in that bullpen, and so we definitely need him and several other guys back in that bullpen, and I think that's definitely something that we definitely need to pay more attention to with him, and as we continue to see what happens over the next couple of days and weeks with this bullpen, like the Jays are dangerously close to needing to uh, make an acquisition, right? Like the depth is getting thin, and it might not have to be anybody crazy, but we've seen Beasley and we've seen who's the other one, Papaya or whatever his name is. I can never get that.
Oh, Joel Payamps, yeah.
Yeah, but so can never get that one right. But we've seen those couple of guys be used in late inning scenarios. Like Beasley the other night was tough to watch, kind of bringing home that Phillies game. But we don't have the bullpen depth. That's my biggest concern.
You're absolutely right, Ty. And I think the original plan with Yates and Chatwood and Merriweather and Romano, those were like, okay, those are four guys that I think were maybe tagged to do high leverage situations. Now, of course, Yates is gone and probably will never put on a Jays uniform again. Merriweather on the 60-day IL. Once you get past Romano and Chatwood, who's been impressive as well, like who do you turn to for high leverage innings out of the bullpen? Well, if you put your manager's hat on, who would you pick?
It's Romano for sure in the high leverage, but Chatwood is exactly what we signed him up to be. I mean, I've been watching Chatwood for years. He's a guy that I've rostered in a lot of my fantasy leagues for a while. Like Chatwood is certainly going to be a staple of the back end, and they brought him in to be that, right? I mean, that's what they brought him in as an absolute starting rotation emergency problem. But the bullpen is banged up, so we're not going to see Chatwood in that emergency role. But if I'm the front office right now, like I'm monitoring what happens with the Twins over the next 7 days, and I am trying to buy low on Alex Colomé, similar to what we did with Robbie Ray last season. Like, here's some money, Minnesota, give us Colomé, and even if you let him go later in the season, if the depth is back and healthy, it's going to cost you some money to stabilize and bring in that veteran arm that's just been getting it done. It looks like he's righted the ship. I don't know that Minnesota would part with him, but he's definitely somebody the Jays should have on their radar if they don't already.
And that's the really interesting part about baseball. And you're right, too. If I was the front office, I'd be keeping my eyes on the Twins. I'd also be keeping my eyes on the Giants, which might seem counterintuitive. They're off to a great start, and they're hanging with the big boys in the NL West. I just don't know that they can keep it up. A lot of veteran presence on that team. And if they start to fade down the stretch, might be a couple of interesting names that become available there.
Well, in Chicago as well, the Cubs are in that same kind of category because Cubs have maybe the hardest decision in baseball this season. Like they've got to decide, do they ride or die and see if this team can make one last run, or do they clear the cabinets and try to restock the farm system, which I think is the logical move because of their starting rotation. But we'll see. I mean, there's definitely some guys that would make this Toronto team better that would be on rental agreements that would be expensive, but maybe the championship move that you need to finalize this team.
So I want to switch now, guys, the conversation, because MLB, it has been a tough season so far for the MLB, but there are stories out there that are amazing. We've had 6 attempts at perfect games so far. And they just keep on coming. It seems like the pitching is holding its edge, and the batters are just dying to try to figure out how to get something going. What do you think we are into with all these high performances in the pitching?
I
I
think it's
mean,
interesting. It's been a debate that's been happening everywhere, right? And everyone says it's the ball, it's the ball, it's the ball. I'm not buying it. I mean, pitching has become the dominant side of this sport over the last several seasons. It's not as if it snuck up on us. I mean, you have two things. Like you have the three true outcome scenario, right? That is kind of becoming the norm in baseball. And it's just the nature of it. And we have it on the Jays, other teams have it elsewhere, but there's this swing and miss mentality of a home run is better than a single. And I personally love to see guys like Nick Madrigal back in baseball, the kind of guys that are hitting the ball all over the field. That's welcomed. Luis Ariz in Minnesota is another guy that is from that cut of cloth. But the pitchers are just that good. They're throwing harder, and the spin rates are insane. So the off speed stuff is, if it's not a mistake, you're not hitting it, right? It's that simple. So I think that's part of the reason. But the other part of it, you add that to just early season. Traditionally, there's always a lack of hitting early on in the season. There's usually a couple guys that get off to a hot start, but for the most part, Jordan Zimmerman is a great example of a guy that pitched almost multiple no hitters on opening day. And, Jordan Zimmerman's career is very hit and miss. So I think if you just look at that, you'll see it disappear. But then you also just have to recognize how good the pitching really is.
yeah, Ty, I largely agree with that. And you can't convince me otherwise. The hardest thing to do in sport is to hit a ball coming at you 90, 95 miles an hour with a stick from 60 and a half feet away. And there's so much emphasis on what I'll call the sexy side of baseball, right? So we're talking about exit velocity and uppercut swings, and everything is, home runs that are tape measured, etc. Pimping the home run and really outsized personalities, which is fantastic for baseball. Don't get me wrong, I love that stuff. But when that becomes the emphasis, there are a lot of holes in your swing, and there's a lot of holes in the game that can be exposed. And good pitchers will learn hitters' propensities, for preferences in terms of their swing and what zones they like to hit in, and a good pitcher will expose that. And I still think good pitching beats good hitting any game, any day of the week. So I'm not surprised, like you said. It goes back and forth. Hitting will catch up, pitching will get better. It'll be a nice tug of war, but good pitching always rises to the occasion.
Unless you're Jacob deGrom, and then you get no support ever.
Poor guy, man.
Yeah, I feel awful for that guy. But I completely agree with you that it's definitely exciting. I mean, they've asked for it. The front offices have said be on base, pump that OPS. And guess what? OPS sometimes comes with strikeouts. That's a fact. And so I guess that's just the new normal in baseball for now. And there'll be an adjustment. Like there will be a counterpunch from the hitters. It'll take time.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at the American League and look at what's making waves in the American League. We have a Boston team that was supposed to be categorized as a team that should be in the bottom, at for fighting with Baltimore for the last spot. I think Baltimore settled into that spot very quickly, and you have them at the top of the league right now, at the top of the American League East, and probably at the top of the league itself. But I don't see Boston remaining there. It's very hard with that pitching staff. Their hitting seems to have come unglued, and I think that it probably will remain there. But that pitching staff is not as solid as it looks.
They're a surprise for me for sure, right? Yankees and Rays was what everyone was expecting at the beginning of this year to carry the division. Jays, with a strong year, would have entered that conversation, challenging for the wild card. Boston was not on the radar for me. And so it'd be interesting for all of us, for me to get a first look at them this year when they play the Jays starting tonight to see what they're all about. But I don't know if they have staying power. To your point, Eduardo, I don't know if they have the pitching depth. My guess is no.
Yeah, they definitely don't. And losing Brian Mata in spring training hurt them. That was a depth piece coming out of the minor leagues that they were expecting to see. The offense is not going to be the problem here in Boston. Like any offense, it's going to come and it's going to go. But overall, this is still, along with Houston and San Diego and LA, like still the best offense in baseball, or one of. And that's not going to change anytime soon. The pitching staff is the part, right? Bobby Delbeck is still coming as a hitter. They've got depth in the minors. Jeter Downs and Duran and Tristan Casas is off to a hot start as well at Double-A. So there's lots of guys coming here for this offense. That's not going to be the issue. But Nick Pivetta 5-0 with a sub-3 ERA, I think he's still in the 2 something. Like, that's a surprise, but Boston acquired him for this purpose. This is what Philly thought he could have been, another Canadian kid that, and he never panned out, and they didn't have the right organizational structure to make that adjustment. Boston said, we'll take that. And really, as a sinker ball pitcher in Fenway, like, that's not a bad option, which is exactly what they have. They got the soft throwing lefties, and then they've got sinker ball guys that keep the ball down. And so he's a good fit for that team, because if he can allow 3 and 4 runs a game, which is I think what we'll see the rest of the year from him, that's a winning formula for Boston. It's when they give up 5, 6, and 7 that they get themselves into trouble, because that bullpen is tired, and it's May.
Well, absolutely tired. And you're right. If he can keep it to say 3 or 4 runs or under, in Fenway, you're never out of a game, because it's such a hitter-friendly park. And so you just don't want him to go out there and throw gas on the fire. And the game gets out of reach, team gets demoralized. But with the offense, from what I've seen so far, they're going to be able to pull out their share of games if you only give up 3 or 4 as a starter.
Absolutely.
So, guys, one of the teams in the American League that is making waves have to be the wonderful Chicago White Sox. They are becoming the LA Dodgers of the American League. They are running away. They are 3.5 games ahead of Cleveland, and they have the biggest league in the American League. Are these guys for real? Are they really that tough that no one can beat them?
You know what? I like a lot of Chicago's makeup. I think they've drafted really well. I'm not a huge fan of the manager. I think that was a bit of a head scratcher. But I really like what they've done. One of my favorite draft picks from a couple years ago was Eloy Jimenez, and so I was watching him. But they've done this without him because of his injury problems. They've got a lot of good-looking kids on that team. I think they're in it for the long haul. As long as La Russa doesn't screw it up.
I think there's a couple things here. I mean, pitching depth for me is the big concern, right? I think that's really what is going to be the difference between this team as a dominant playoff team or just a playoff team. I think they're destined to be a playoff team given the struggles the Twins have had. They have a long way to go to catch up. I'm not ready to rule Cleveland out yet, because you got Tito, the bullpen's strong there, and that rotation has a very strong front end to it. A couple question marks in the back end still, but they have depth in the organization that could still fill it. I mean, if we look at this White Sox rotation, though, it's very strong, right? Like, we've got Dallas Keuchel, who just continues to quietly be successful. He's not out here winning Cy Youngs like he did in Houston, but he's out there giving you, kind of that Steven Matz effort we talked about before. Get me through 5 and 6 innings, and don't lose the game for us. That's Keuchel's job every time he goes out. But then you look at guys like Carlos Rodon, who has been unbelievable so far this season. I have questions as to whether or not he can last the whole year, given his inning count over the past few seasons. And I'm a little concerned that they don't have a leash on that, because they've been still running him out there after long outings regularly. So I think you're going to see him get the piggyback treatment here for a couple of months. At least that's what they should probably be thinking about, because this is a guy that's had multiple arm surgeries. So that's the big probably X factor in this rotation, because then you get into staples like Lance Lynn, who's just going to give you innings, and a breakout candidate in Dylan Cease, who's been really good. So there's lots to like in this rotation, but there's an equal amount of risk attached to these guys as to what their limitations might be.
So let's jump to the American League West. And the two most, I think, the biggest battle that is going to be there are Oakland against Houston. They don't like each other very much, uh, and I think there will be fireworks at the end of the season in
I,
the battle.
I think, before we jump into that, I'll just say when I think about the AL West, the bright, shiny ball that's grabbing everybody's attention right now, it begins and ends with Shohei. And if you saw that home run last night where he basically jacked a ball that was coming in at about at the height of his forehead and crushed it a long, long way. And I hope it has staying power. I think it does. I'm used to seeing so many, international free agents come over to the major leagues, not necessarily live up to the hype. We're seeing what he's doing so far this season, and it's just exciting. And it's not often that you talk about a Mike Trout team and you're not talking about Mike Trout first and foremost.
Well, and I think the English translation for Shohei is daddy hacks. He gets up there and he just lets it go. So I really like to see that.
Yeah,
I know,
absolutely.
definitely Shohei Otani is one of those guys that I'll, if Suzuki didn't put enough power into making himself a legend here in the majors, Otani certainly will with that power at the bat. I think you might as I would take him away from pitching and going in and go and let him hit all day long, every single day.
And he is doing it on the mound as well. Like I'm not saying he's going to win a Cy Young, but he locates his pitch as well. From what I've seen, he's got good velocity, and I don't mind him being a part of that rotation at all. But you're right. I think he does more at the bat than he does on the mound.
Well, I mean, everything's good. Like he's got 40 strikeouts in 25 innings. I mean, that's a very high number, right? If you pull up his baseball savant page, he lights the lamp and pretty much everything except for walks. That is the big, wart on his pitching side is not location, but it's control. I think those are two different things, and so that's the piece of the puzzle. If he does that, he is the best player in baseball, right? If he can cut down that walk rate. Right now, he's already pretty close, but if he cuts down that walk rate, there's no argument to be made that there's a better player in the game that's more valuable than Shohei Ohtani. But in that AL West, though, I think the team everybody was sleeping on was the Houston Astros. And I rang that bell all offseason. I'm like, listen, you got Kyle Tucker coming. And for whatever reason, people didn't believe Yonder Alvarez was a superstar. And that guy is an absolute stud. And I've said this before on our podcast. I think Yonder is arguably one of the best hitters, if not in the conversation for best hitter in the game of baseball, because although he can hit the ball 500 feet, he can also lace a single through the left side. And for a big left-handed power bat, you don't see that all that often. So I think the skill set for him is very underappreciated. And I hope more people, but throughout this season, pay more attention as we get into the summer and that ball starts reaching that 500-foot mark.
Yeah, you know what? Alvarez is a great one, and he's up and coming too, right? He hasn't even scratched the surface of his potential
23.
yet. But you've got a championship pedigree there. You've got Gurriel is still Gurriel, Altuve is still Altuve, Bregman. I like Maldonado behind the plate, by the way. I'm surprised so many people were sleeping on them. I look at them as Yankees in the 90s, anyway, the last few years of just constantly putting out really strong teams that threaten you every day. And you don't want to sleep on Houston, in my mind.
Okay.
So let's go from the American League West to the National League West, because that's where the fireworks are coming from. A lot of people didn't think San Francisco had what it took to match up to San Diego and to LA. Everyone discounted them. And then you have, pitching in San Francisco. Kevin Gossman, who no one thought would do anything. So all of a sudden, he is the man in that National League. When you have a whip under 5, it's something to look at. And I don't know. What do you guys think? Is there an LA repeat? Because I don't see it.
Well, I don't know. Interested in Ty's take on this, but they're a hot mess right now. After that blistering start, they're what, 5 or 6 games under 500 now. Injuries have a lot to do with that, for sure. But just so many aspects of the game haven't been there. And it's still early days. I wouldn't count the Dodgers out yet, but they really need to right the ship before they sink too far behind. The likes of the Padres, like I said, the Giants are there right now. The Padres could, if they get consistency, they could put some serious distance between themselves and the Dodgers.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, Kevin Gausman could not have landed in a better spot than San Francisco. I mean, he was built for that ballpark, right? His repertoire is down in the zone, and his fastball is traditionally located down. And it was always just a matter of him giving up home runs in Baltimore, and then even a little bit in Cincinnati. But we've seen the revolution of guys that have went through Cincinnati, very similar to what we were talking about earlier in Toronto. Like, Kevin Gausman is a product of Cincinnati, as they're calling it, and that revolution got him a contract, and he's delivering on that deal, which you like to see because it doesn't always happen that way. So it's nice to see there. When it comes to the Dodgers, though, you're right. It's still very early days, and they've played a lot of games against San Diego, and in a lot of tough games so far in that season. So it's still too early to write off anything. I mean, I think they brought Albert Pujols in for the very simple purpose of writing that clubhouse. I don't think that there's something going on behind the scenes. And somebody mentioned something last night to me that had never occurred to me. And I would be really curious to see if it's part of the issues in LA. And that's around Corey Seager. And Corey Seager not wanting to resign there, hasn't resigned yet. Everything looks like he should resign there. But then somebody said Kyle Seager in Seattle and Seattle's need for a shortstop. And that light bulb went off in my head last night. And I'm like, that 100% could be part of this conversation, is that he has been outed, someone by the front office or by the players, as to why are you not wanting to be here, and maybe that's gotten out in some capacity. And there's 100 reasons that could be behind the scenes that we don't know about, but that one is an interesting storyline to watch moving forward with what they do, because you've got Michael Busch, you've got Gavin Lux, you've got infielders to replace him, and I think it's a big reason why they brought Turner back as an alternative, and they gave it 2 years to recover from a potential Corey Seager leaving the Dodgers. So a very interesting debate, but I think the Dodgers are going to be there. I don't know that they're going to repeat as champs, but they're just too good to not be around at the end of this season.
So let's look at what's happening right now. We have San Fran in first spot, San Diego second, Dodgers in third. I don't think the Dodgers. I think it's early in the season, as you said, Ty, and the Dodgers will come up somehow. But that's San Diego's team has more than it has done so far. And I think once June, July get into the picture, these guys are going to just smash the ball out of every single part they face. It's a tough situation.
Well,
I apologize, guys. I know that, but we are out of time. And I just want to thank you very much, and let our audience know that this show can be heard as well on the Spanglish Radio Network and its affiliates on social media. Please remember to go to our website, SpanglishWorld.com, for all the news, where our host and columnists write about all kinds of sports. Remember, Spanglish Sports World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, but especially live it, because Spanglish Sports World is sport, and sport is Spanglish Sports World. In the name of Rick Kotick, Tyler Childs, my name is Eduardo Harari. We'll be back with you tomorrow afternoon at the same time and in this same channel on Single TV, channels 249 and 250, to bring you the best of sport as a whole. And until then, please remain at home. Please remain safe during these pandemic times of COVID-19.